that crossed right into our election. And so my hope is that we will start, as you mentioned, as Chasten mentioned a little bit earlier, that we start to focus in on our elections locally. We need to be able to bring more folks into politics on a local level, which is really the benchmark of our community. And so I'm so happy that as an educator like Chasten, that our youth are really stirring things up and really taking their frustrations to the ballot box.
Chasten, what about you? How would you build off that?
Yeah, absolutely. Lamont is onto something when he's talking about people feeling like their lives are actually reflected in the hope and possibility when we're taking that to the ballot box. All politics is personal, and the reason so many people turned out in this election, especially for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, not only to rebuke this disaster of a presidency, but because we are at this moment, I think, in politics and American history where people are realizing just how personal politics is, and that we're electing people like Lamont, who other people can see themselves reflected in. And it's not just about, we get so caught up in the presidency being, the big show, the big ticket, the only office that we're constantly talking about, right? The 2024 conversations have already started, right? It's the best show on television, right? But it's people like Lamont, it's local elected officials who are making direct change in people's states and cities. And oftentimes, it's not just, a sympathetic president or vice president. It's a school board member or House rep or state senator who is also fighting for the things that you believe in. And I think this year there was so much at stake, right? We love to say it's the most consequential election of our lifetimes. I really do think that was true this time around, especially for the Democratic Party, where I truly believe that we are the party for other people. And there's, a lot of data, a lot of writings, and a lot of think pieces coming out right now that, if so many constituencies had stayed home, Joe Biden wouldn't have won this election. It's because the Democratic Party stands for racial justice. The Democratic Party stands for LGBTQIA inclusion and justice, right? The Democratic Party is consistently the party that is showing up for other people, for working families, and for people who are historically and continuously marginalized or othered. And that is why I think we're also at this moment where people are just saying enough. We would like to, in a perfect world, believe that the people that we elect to send to Washington, right, or send to the state house have our best interests at heart, and we can go on about our normal lives, focusing on our families, our children, our jobs. But now we're realizing that those people, most of the people in this president, they're not there because they care about us. They don't have our best interests at heart. And we all have to do the hard part of showing up and organizing and fundraising and doing the work to get these people out of office. And I think we're at this boiling point, right, that Lamont was sort of talking about, especially when it comes to racial justice and inclusion, that people have just said enough. And I think that now the new task will be channeling all of that energy going forward, right? Because we don't want to sigh. We want to breathe that sigh of relief. We got to get out of the White House. All the institutions haven't been restored. All rights haven't been restored. Not all of the wrongs have been righted. And we're going to need people going forward. And that will be, the task, as continuously bringing people along, building the tent, making sure that the tent is wider and welcoming more people into it. But I think as people enter that tent, they're realizing that we are truly the party that stands for them.
Well, I'm going to ask you both to pull out a little bit of what you addressed. I think what was really wonderful to see in this past year, in particular, was how you both were active, obviously, in supporting presidential candidates all the way down. And so one of the things we're starting to see, and again, this is just early hypotheses, is, we're starting to see a bunch of people may have voted at the top of the ticket, but then left the voting booth after that. We certainly heard, I know I heard a lot on the election cycle that people were like, I can't give to local offices because I put all my money in the presidential race. What do you say to donors, to voters, to stakeholders who understand what is at stake at the top of the ticket, but are not yet activated to engage all the way down ballot? Lamont, let maybe start with you on that one.
Brian, that again is a great question. As I mentioned a little earlier, the same energy that our youth focus in on the protest to the ballot box, I think that we need to have that same energy in local elections, because as an elected official that is in the state house, the laws that I put forth, for instance, the Poverty Commission that the governor just signed to eradicate poverty in the state of Illinois, is something that is state-driven, that really affects communities like downstate Cairo or over in Inglewood, that going back to lack of education, quality education, lack of quality health care. These areas have food deserts. Also, making sure that we stem HIV within our young people. Also, looking at licensing police officers. I'm a licensed insurance agent. And so I have a license. If I do something wrong, I could lose my business. I can lose my livelihood. But that's not the same for police officers. Chasten and I are both educators. We can be licensed to be able to teach. And that's, again, not the same for police officers. And so I mentioned those things because I think that we focus in on the larger elections, the presidential elections, and we don't focus in on what's going on at home. And so I've heard that as well, Brian, that a lot of folks are putting their money in the presidential election and not really putting their money, also their time into the local elections. But understand that the local elections affect us in our day-to-day lives, particularly in a state like Illinois. And so with that said, I think it's important that my job is to get information out to my constituents and let them know the things that I'm doing. Like I mentioned to you a little earlier, we had a situation where families in my community did not have masks. The families, particularly at the height of COVID, did not have food items. And so again, it's another reason that we should be making sure that we support our local politicians, because those are the ones that really had their eyes on the streets as well as their ear to the ground to know what to do as it relates to affecting change, but also supporting efforts in their community. And so it's extremely important that we support our local electeds, which is why it's so important to have an event like this tonight. Not only is this supporting me, but there are also other candidates that I'm supporting in the state of Illinois and outside that I believe will do the right thing for communities across the United States, which is why it's important to have a fundraising effort to be able to help not only myself again, but other folks out there. I see Alex out there who is running for township supervisor, and it's folks like Alex who have been doing great things that we want to support, that my campaign is happy to endorse. I can't wait to get out and walk door to door with Alex, because we need people like Alex in office that are going to do the right thing, that again have their ear to the ground and their eyes on the street to be able to change the director of their communities.
I mean, snaps for that, Brian. Lamont, I think you're absolutely correct, and this will be, test for all of us to pressure, folks like the DNC and the DCCC to support local races, something that kind of burns my biscuits, on election night when we get results coming in Indiana once again. Goes for Trump, and people on Twitter and people around television, saying, Indiana, screw Indiana, like, let's get rid of Indiana, and I want people to know that there are progressives in South Bend, Indiana, who didn't give up on Indiana, who didn't leave Indiana, who moved back to Indiana, who are trying their hardest to flip Indiana blue, to keep Indiana in certain places blue. And we should be investing in those people, in those parties, in those races just as much. When Pete was running, I think every station and paper and blog, whatever, in Indiana ran a story on him every single day. And while Pete was running for president, over here, and everyone was watching the show, again, it's the biggest show, right? Over here, an openly homophobic person is now sitting on the South Bend City Council. Ran for city council. I don't think there was one story about a known homophobe running for city council in South Bend who is now occupying that seat. And it's every queer kid here in South Bend that I am worried about. That, yeah, it would have been really cool for them to have an openly gay president. But who's also making decisions on their behalf? That person who's occupying the seat on the city council. And that's why those races are so important, is because it's not only that it's not only the fact that people need sympathetic politicians at the highest level in government, but it's also local government where people are making decisions directly about their neighborhoods, about their schools, about their lives. And we need to be investing in those places, even in bright red Indiana. And so it is extremely important that we invest in red states and purple states. I mean, look at what Stacey Abrams was part of in Georgia, right? It would have been very easy for Stacey Abrams to just give up on Georgia, but there are people who don't give up on the places that they love. And you invest, blood, sweat, and tears. And yes, that's also going to take money, and we should be investing more money in places like that where we know that we can win.
Great. Thank you both for that. And I just want to call out that, we definitely do not want to burn Chasten's biscuits. We had a question in the chat that is similar to something that I've been thinking a lot about. We saw, just a couple of weeks ago, Supreme Court Justice Alito, I believe it was, talking about the need to, quote unquote, fix the Obergefell decision, granting marriage equality to all people across the country. We're in a different world with the Supreme Court than we were, 3 months ago, let alone 3 years ago. If we kind of zoom back up to the highest levels, what can we do in terms of advocacy and activism to ensure, the rights of LGBTQ plus people are protected, judicially, as well as, legislatively, and make sure that our protections are not further jeopardized. Chasten, I don't know if you have ideas on that first.
Sure. I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts, and not enough drinks. So I think, people like Supreme Court Justice Alito I don't think they're pretending to hold their cards close to their chest. But on the same token, I also want to believe that there is precedent. But like you said, Brian, we are, sort of in a new era. But here's something that I do know, that there's already pushback against statements like that. There are already news articles, right, about how that is wrong, that's homophobic. It goes against the ideals of our nation, because a majority of Americans now support LGBTQIA rights. And we wouldn't have gotten there unless all of the other work had been done. And so if this were, Justice Alito saying this in 1995, then sure, although I realize that's a mixed history timeline because we wouldn't have had marriage equality in 1995. But people are pushing back on him and the Supreme Court because the majority of Americans now support our basic human rights. And the way that we will continue to win those fights is if we continue bringing people along. And every organization, every person who is still fighting that fight is so important. From Lamont being in his seat and holding that seat and continuing to hold that seat, to national organizations who are fighting for inclusion and rights. I think it will be much harder for the Supreme Court to have a case, to take up a case reasonably to overturn. Now, I am not a legal scholar at all, but it makes it a lot harder for people like him and for any homophobic or transphobic politician around the country to spew that kind of hatred when the majority of Americans support us. And that's why it's important to keep doing the work that brings people along. Like I said, to keep building the tent, make the tent wider. I met those types of people on the campaign trail who weren't always there for us, who weren't always open-minded and inclusive, and who at one point in their life did not believe that I should have the right to have a child, to have a family, to have a husband. And then they were out there with their clipboards knocking on doors, in New Hampshire and in Iowa. And we can bring people along if we make space for them and we welcome them onto the right side of history. That's kind of the work that I'm focusing on, and I'll keep focusing on. How do we bring more people along? So that when people like Alito decide to spit out some hatred, the majority of Americans are going to refute it.
Great. Thank you, Chasten. I just want to, if you're enjoying this conversation, if you're seeing why people like Chasten and myself are so supportive of Lamont and the leadership he is bringing to the state, please don't forget to go to tinyurl.com/support Lamont Robinson to invest in the type of leadership we want to see here in Illinois. I want to lift up something that Shannon Lynn Parker, the esteemed Shannon Lynn Parker, has put in the chat, and I know this is something she and I have talked about a little bit, which is, we've seen a lot of powerful energy and momentum, and Lamont, you started your remarks today talking about this, around, really powerful, persuasive headlines like the fair tax, headlines like defund the police, that really motivated a key base and a growing group of people to get out to the polls. And, the issues that we're talking about are complex and nuanced. So how do you think about, going beyond these headlines which capture the hearts and minds of so many of us, to really educating people about the complexities and the importance of the issues that we're asking them to decide on in a quick moment in a ballot box? Lamont, what are your thoughts on that?
Brian, as we just are coming out of our election, the fair tax was something that we all thought that was very clear, that it was a loophole, and this is the state of Illinois. So I have some friends out there, Chasten, that are in DC, and Atlanta, and in Texas, and so they're like what the hell is a fair tax? So let me try to explain this very quickly, and not bore you folks. If you make over $250,000 a year, if I make $250,000 a year, and Chasten makes $30,000 a year, Chasten and I pay the same percentage of taxes, the same percent in taxes, and that's just not fair. If you make more money, you should be paying a higher percentage of taxes. And so that is what our governor put out there, because we have to figure out ways to bring revenue into the state of Illinois. We cannot continue to tax our way out of the issues that we're having, and we can't continue to tax low income and our seniors. And so the fair tax was a great way that we can bring revenue into the state. Unfortunately, we, and I include myself in this, did not educate our constituents on what this really meant. And so unfortunately, that fair tax failed. And now we have to go in this direction of increasing taxes in the state. And we all know when we talk about increasing taxes, what are the first things that we look at cutting? We look at cutting education, we look at cutting healthcare. And so it's very unfortunate, Brian, to your question, that we did not get out in front of this. And so as an elected official, my job, and at one point I had weekly newsletters, and I also did several Zoom calls across the district. You mentioned a little earlier that I have one of the most diverse districts in the state. And so on the north end of my district, on the Gold Coast, to my constituents that high net worth, I did Zoom calls to explain to them that how the importance of the passing the fair tax, even though they were going to be hit the hardest, that we had to be able to share in the struggle that we're having in the state to bring much needed revenue. Unfortunately, I think that we did not educate folks on the importance of the fair tax. And we didn't also put out there that what was going to be the situation if this did not pass. And so unfortunately, we are back at the drawing board, and it is going to be the Democratic Party and the Black Caucus that is going to fight to make sure that we don't put cuts out there that we won't be able to rebound from. I don't have to share with folks, we were in this same situation in the Rauner administration. We had a Republican governor that wanted to cut, and we had to hold that off. And so now here we are back at the table around raising taxes, but also making cuts. And so we have to have a balance. I appreciate the governor putting the fair tax out there because it was a loophole that should be closed. And unfortunately, we did not have the votes in the state to be able to issue it. But again, it goes back to education, which is why it's important for me to work with organizations like Equality Illinois, NAACP, other faith-based organizations to be able to get out in front of people and explain to them in the simplest form as an educator why it's important to vote on this particular legislation. And again, I think that we did not do a good job of educating folks. And so here we are again, back at the drawing board, looking for much needed revenue to make sure that we do have schools that have the resources they need to educate our youth, which we know, particularly in the city of Chicago, is a huge struggle.
And Chasten, in other places or on a national level, like how do you see people effectively kind of bridging that, I would say that really difficult task between summing up an issue in a way that is compelling and inspiring people to turn out, while also making sure you're educating enough people so that they are able to make the hard decisions on those ballots?
I think one of the main tasks and jobs of a politician or an organizer, an activist, is to convince people that they belong. And in order to bring people along, they have to feel like they belong. They have to see themselves reflected in your message, in your work, in your campaign. And if you're not able to help people see, like, this is how my life is connected to this is how my life is changed by this, not only my life, but this is how this issue or this work or this bill or this person will not only improve my life, but for maybe other people that I don't even know. But we have to convince people that it is the right work, that it is the just work, and it is the important work. And we call it relational organizing on our campaign. I think it's just good old-fashioned organizing where we actually encouraged our organizers in the field, especially in Iowa, to sort of cut the script and go do what they know how to do in their own neighborhoods, in their own communities, to bring their own people along. A lot of research shows that it's not necessarily the quippy tweet or the ad, or the mailer or the postcard or the commercial that's going to convince you, Brian, to vote for a candidate or to vote for a cause. They will not be as effective as someone that you know or someone that you love reaching out to you and helping you understand why it's important to come along. And that's what we have encouraged our followers to do and our organizers to do. And I think that's how you see other people bringing more activists and more family members and friends into the mix, is when someone that you love reaches out and says, hey, guess what? I need you to show up. Ally is actually an action word. You can't just read your way out of injustice. You can't just tweet things or post pictures and think that you're doing all of the work. I actually need you to show up, come out into the street, and do the work alongside me. And it's when people are not only invited to do that work, but they see themselves in the work, that I think we bring more people along.
Yeah. I'm not going to do justice to this exact question that Pastor Straight has posed, but I hope I have the license to build off of that for you, Lamont, which is, I know you and I have talked a little bit about this over the years, about how, I think too many people, and particularly too many people in Springfield, kind of think of communities in silos, that there's either the Black community or the queer community or the Latino community. And we know that, our communities overlap and intersect. And how do you go about doing the work with your colleagues and in community to draw the connections between the justice claims and issues being led, for example, by the organizers in front of the movement for Black Lives, and the justice needs and desires of other communities like the LGBTQ community that you're a member of and you work with?
Pastor Straight, thank you for that question. It is something that I am continuing to work on. The first thought that popped in my head is that I about a year ago went through a program where you take legislators and you do a reverse, what's called a reverse district. And so I spent a day in downstate Illinois. I took the train to one of my colleagues' districts. It was about a 3-hour train ride from Chicago. And I toured a hog farm. I have some great pictures with some cattle. And what is interesting is that the same issues that I'm having around quality healthcare, around quality education, my Republican counterparts are having in downstate Illinois. But if I didn't go tour this representative's district, I wouldn't have known that. And so for me, it is getting outside of the 5th district and understanding and making connections to other representatives and letting them know that we do have the same struggles, even though we might be in different parties. Our constituent base doesn't care about that. They just want the same thing. They want quality healthcare, they want quality education, and they want to be able to feel safe when they leave their homes. And so for me, I understand that I have to be able to work with my colleagues across the aisle on legislation that they might not understand. The PrEP bill, giving PrEP to adolescents, was huge. A lot of folks thought that why would you want to give an adolescent PrEP? And I had to explain to them that many of our youth, when we look at HIV, the rate of HIV, the numbers are going up within our youth. And so being able to talk about that to my counterparts within my own party, which was difficult, but then also on the Republican Party, it is because I've been able to build relationships. And not only traveling downstate, being able to go to other areas in the state, East St. Louis, that also is having a struggle with one of their safety nets that also has been in discussions about closing. And so for me, it is getting outside of Chicago, Reverend Straight, and being able to build relationships, because we have to be able to lean on them. And I need to be able to pass my legislation, and they know that whatever I'm putting out there, they can trust that I'm doing the right thing for not only for my district, but but also for the entire state. And so it's really just a balance to be able to build relationships. And as Chasten mentioned a little earlier, being able to make sure that folks feel like they can come into the tent. And so that's one of the things that I have done early on in my career in the General Assembly, is just to make sure that people understand that that I understand their issues, and then want to be able to come and view what they have going on in their districts, and hopefully that they will come into my districts as well, because at the end of the day, we all have the same issues.
Lamont, I think that's great. And I am not going to let you slide over the Mercy Hospital case. You know, we are facing, a historic pandemic. You mentioned the incredible needs of your community that you've been able to address, like more masks, more food items. But also healthy communities need healthy hospitals. And there's a real fight going on right now. Could you just talk about the issue, and can you highlight for everyone what you've been doing to make sure that people in the 5th District have a place to go to have their health needs met?
Thank you, Brian. It is a fight that unfortunately I have been fighting along with my Senator Matty Hunter, Alderman Sophia King, and Alderman Pat Dow. Unfortunately, outside of us, there are some other elected officials that have a larger bully pulpit, Brian, that unfortunately I have not been able to get much help with. And that is, there is a hospital that has been providing care to the African-American community for 100+ years. This hospital was the only hospital that African-Americans can go to receive care. And this hospital is owned by Trinity, which is a parent company out of Livonia, Michigan. They are a billion-dollar corporation. They have another hospital here in the state, right outside of Chicago, Loyola, that they're keeping open. But the hospital that provides care for the African-American community, a hospital that also employs African-Americans, they have decided to close in the midst of one of the greatest pandemics of our lifetime. It is just unquestionable that anybody would close a hospital in the midst of a pandemic. And so my fight has been to protest on a weekly basis. It seems like I was just outside of Mercy Hospital. We had a press conference this morning with faith-based leaders to protest the closure of the hospital. December 15th, the hospital will go in front of the Illinois Health Board, and hopefully the vote will be no, that they do not close. There are buyers that are out there, Brian, that want to buy the hospital and continue to provide quality health care on the South Side. But we need Trinity, and we need the governor, and we need the mayor to get involved on this and bring in resources to make sure that we continue to keep quality health care on the South Side of Chicago in the midst of a pandemic. And so it is something that I have been pushing. I feel a lot of times like the Lone Ranger out there, but when I open up my email, or when I go to press conferences and I see the physicians and I see the nurses and I see the community members that continue to tell me, Lamont, keep doing what you're doing. We need this hospital. My mother had a situation where she was saved at Mercy Hospital. That's the resolve that I need to continue to push. And so, Brian, I appreciate you bringing this up. I mentioned a little earlier that I'll be just approved for op-ed in the Sun-Times about Trinity Hospital. And so please go out and pick up the Sun-Times paper on Friday. I want to thank Mitch, who used to work for Equality Illinois, that helped me with that op-ed. And for me, it is just to continue to push that we have to have quality healthcare. We talk about Black Lives Matter, and if Black Lives matters, Black healthcare matters. And unfortunately, in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois, Brian, at the top of the food chain, it's a disconnect. And so I'm trying to push the folks up of the food chain to do better and save this hospital.
Lamont, that is the poster child answer, I think, for why it matters to have great leaders like you in office, because we could have whoever we have and whatever wins we could achieve by having the right person in the White House. But if that happens and our hospital down the street is closing, then our victory is incomplete. So thank you for your incredible work there. In addition to reading the op-ed and getting caught up on the issue, what could people on this call do to support the cause and keeping Mercy open?
Thank you. Please call the governor. Please call the mayor if you're in the city of Chicago. Let them know that, again, that if Black Lives Matters, Black healthcare matters, and please keep Mercy Hospital open. The governor and the mayor needs to hear from you. Also, openstates.com. Many of you, if I'm not your state rep, if you don't know who your state rep is, please reach out to your state rep and your state senator and let them know that it's important to keep Mercy Hospital open as well. Those are the small things that we can do to keep the push, to keep the energy going so that we can save this hospital. And I have hope that we can do this.
Thank you. And I just want to make sure those of you who are seeing as we're having this conversation in the chat, there's a link there that you can go and give. If you haven't given to Lamont's efforts tonight, please do so. If you have, go ahead and double it. You can double down on the leadership and vision that Lamont is bringing not only to the 5th District in the city of Chicago, but to the state at large. Drew, asked this question around every year. We see far too many of our trans and gender nonconforming siblings being murdered without any justice. And this is a particular crisis for Black trans women and trans women of color. What do you all think as you look in the community, Chasten, as you talk to leaders across the country, what more can we be doing to ensure the safety and justice for our trans community?
Thanks, Brian. And thank you, Drew, for your question. It's good to see you on this call. I know you've been on a few other Team Pete calls, and I love your activism. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're here supporting Lamont. There's this sense among some people in our country, I think, when we're talking about bringing people along, that, this being trans is this like new wave thing that's just now happening. And it can be scary and confusing for some, especially those who identify as trans. And the things that we can do is try to make this world just a little bit kinder and more accepting in small ways and in big ways. So that people who are intimidated and fearful or downright hateful of other people have to stop and think twice. The way that, Brian, you and I sort of benefit from some of that privilege, that there was a day when people, and of course there still is in many places in this country, wouldn't have accepted you and I in the room either. And that's certainly to say that Lamont, things are different in every community, right? And that we have all faced different struggles based on our race, our gender, and how we identify even in our own community. I see that, Brian, you put your pronouns in your name. I throw mine up in there as well. There are little tiny things that we can do to just show the world that this is something that we care about. Because you know what? We're the change makers right now. And we want to live in a world where we don't have to do those types of things. Well, guess what? We're the lucky generation that gets to do those things. We get to make the world better for other people. We get to stand up and show up for, our trans brothers and sisters. Then we elect people like Lamont. We take it a little bit further. We elect people who are going to go to the state house or the city council or the White House, wherever it is, who actually believe in the dignity of trans Americans, who don't only believe in trans Americans, but vocalize their support and their love of trans Americans. And it changes things. It changes things when you put your pronouns in your profile, when you say things out loud, when you actually live the T in the acronym, because everyone says LGBTQ, but if you truly support LGBTQ people, then by the virtue of the acronym, you're saying that you support trans Americans. And allyship means supporting everyone in the acronym. And we are just we're part of this moment in history. I think that's going to ask us to do the little things and ask us to do the big things. And that can be from naming issues, repeating the issues, and making sure that the issues stay on the table, and trying to be the best ally that you can. And I think if you are trying to be the best ally that you can, you have to recognize again that allyship is an action, and allyship requires action and money if you have it. There are a lot of trans organizations that could really use your money as well, and then live that value. Lamont, do you want to add anything?
Chasten, thank you for that. And I mean, you hit the ball right out of the park. I think that it's one of the reasons that we have to support organizations like Equality Illinois, that's been at the forefront of making sure that our LGBTQ community, and also focusing in on the T, that when legislation passes, that we make sure that we protect our trans brothers and sisters that are really catching hell. But we also need to make sure that when opportunities arise for our boards appointments, that we make sure that they have a seat at the table. I mentioned a little bit earlier, I put forth legislation, the Poverty Commission, to study poverty across the state, and to eradicate poverty. And Shannon Lynn Parker, who is a dear friend and doing some amazing work at Howard Brown, who is in the trans community, was appointed to that board, because we see that poverty hits our community. The LGBTQ, poverty hits the LGBTQ community, and so having someone like Shannon on that board is extremely important. And so again, I think it's important that we support our organizations that have a lens to the trans community, but then also when opportunities come up to point them to boards, that we do so. When opportunities come up that we can support our trans brothers and sisters that have businesses, we should be doing that. And so it should be a holistic approach. And so that is another reason, Chasten, that we have to widen the tent. We have to bring in folks like Alex and others to run for public office. I can't do it all on my own. Chasten, you can't do it all on your own. Pete can't do it all on their own. We have to support others to run for public office, to get out there and do the right thing. And so that is why it's important when we talk about supporting Lamont's efforts, these efforts also support other folks. And it's extremely important that, again, that we support these folks, because again, the road out there, Chasten, as you know, on these issues, you turn around and there's nobody out there. And so we need to be able to, again, open the tent up to others.
Lamont, thank you. On that note, I'm really excited about the next part of our program. I am going to bring us back for a call to action, but we do get a really, really unique opportunity for a call like this. We have a special performance from saxophonist Ray Silkman, who's joined us tonight. He began playing saxophone at the age of 12. From humble beginnings, Ray pursued his dream of playing music, often earning money by playing on street corners and in subway stations. Got his first break while playing on the street corners of Oak and Rush in Chicago. Ray is now touted as one of the best saxmen in the business. To learn more about Ray and his music, please visit www.raysilkman.com. And so that you know, for those of you that don't know, what a privilege that would be to go check out that website. We're excited to turn the stage over to you, Ray, right now.
Well, thank you. I'm definitely honored to be here and champion the cause for Lamont's efforts in the government, and looking forward to all of the things that are definitely going to come and happen due to the involvement of people who are not only talking the talk but walking the walk. So I'd like to do this song, and thank you for inviting me. It's my honor to be a part of it. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Great, thank you so much for that. So please make sure if you want more of that, please go check out www.raysilkman.com. Listen, I want to thank Chasten for joining us tonight. I want to thank Representative Lamont Robinson, obviously, for everything that he does. And listen, I'm gonna leave you all with some quick closing thoughts, which is, you know, if we had 100% voter turnout, representatives like Lamont would not have to go out there and ask for your support. But for every dollar that you invest in his leadership and his work means that he can reach out to more voters, to talk to them about Mercy Hospital, to explain why we need a commission on poverty elimination and economic security, to explain why we need to get representatives who are going to fight for a fair tax and more supplies for our communities. And so your investment in Lamont Robinson tonight really has a rippling effect on justice in our community. And as I always like to tell my team at Equality Illinois, y'all, if justice were free, we would already have it. So for those of you that have donated already, thank you so much. For those of you who can donate just a little bit more, and I know it's the holidays and it's been a tough year, but even just another investment in justice for our community, there are 3 ways you can do it. Monica's been putting some links into our chat. You can click on that right now and make a quick donation. If you want to go get a quick glass of wine or bourbon and then go to tinyurl.com/support Lamont Robinson, you can do that. Or if you want to break out your checkbook right now, you could do so and send it to Friends to Elect Lamont Robinson at 5050 South Indiana Avenue. That's 5050 South Indiana Avenue here in Chicago, 60615. And with that, a huge thank you. Happy holidays to everybody. And here is to a more just, more affirming, and maybe just a little bit more queer 2021. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Lamont. Best wishes.
Thank you, Chasten. And thank you so very, very much, Brian. And thank you to everyone. Stay well and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everybody.